Good morning to everyone. I'm John McNally. I'm the MP for Falkirk and I'm the chair of the appg on Youth Action Against Climate Change. So thank you very much. I hope you're all safe and well. This morning, I'm delighted to be introducing three external speakers to talk to us about an extremely important topic, taking action, including legal action about climate change. So for your information, we are recording this meeting today with your consent in order that we can share out and send out to other MPs and schools who are very interested in our appg. So at the last meeting, we heard from members about what they'd like to see discussed at these meetings. And a key theme from several MPs and people that came up was a desire to hear more about how youth activists are taking action against big companies, indeed all levels of government, in the fight to tackle climate change. So today we'll be hearing from three people who are directly involved in such cases and campaigns, and furthermore delighted to welcome secondary school students from across the country who are involved with our secretariat, the Interclimate Network Climate Voices programme. So a wee bit of housekeeping to begin with. We'll be opening up the appg, the meeting, question and answers for members and then students in the second half of the meeting. But please do keep your microphones on mute if you're not speaking. If you have any comments or questions throughout the meeting, then do pop them in the chat with your name, school and who the question is for, and we'll endeavour to respond to as many as we possibly can. If we don't manage to get to your question, you'll make sure to take a note and get back to you after the meeting. So I and our secretariat will try to keep an eye out for anyone that has been missed as best as we possibly can. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to our first presenter, Mikaela Loach, who will be providing our first presentation of the day, and I'm sure it will be very interesting to hear about her climate change activities. So thank you, Mikaela. Over to you.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you all for being here. So I'm just going to quickly share my screen so that you can see my slide. There we go. Okay, and present. Just let that load for 1 sec. Perfect. Can everyone see that? Can I just get a thumbs up from someone? I can see a nod, that works. Perfect. So my name is Mikaela Loach, and I am a claimant on a court case against the UK government and the Oil and Gas Association around the amount of public money that is given to oil and gas companies in the North Sea. So billions of pounds of public money has been wasted propping up this declining industry, and we think that we shouldn't be paying out and propping up big polluters. But a bit about me and before I go into that. So I'm a climate justice activist and a fifth-year medical student. I also co-host a podcast, and I'm based in Edinburgh in Scotland. And I am a claimant on this court case, which will be the kind of theme of this presentation. I'll try and keep to time because I know that there's lots of other wonderful people to speak. So before I kind of go on to the court case itself, I just wanted to say a wee note about the Stop Cambo campaign, which is connected to the court case, whilst it's not what the court case is about. The UK government is set to approve a new oil field called the Cambo field in the North Sea in the coming months, just before COP26. So it is complete climate hypocrisy that the UK government, who like to call themselves leaders on climate action and climate justice, are set to approve a new oil field in the North Sea mere months before hosting the biggest climate conference in the world. This is a hypocrisy that we need to call out and call it out for the violence that it is against the world and in the amount of emissions that will be produced from this field. There's a bit of information on it there, but also we staged an occupation at the UK government building in Edinburgh yesterday. 12 activists occupied the building from before 8 in the morning until 4 p.m. yesterday, and we had a rally with lots of different speakers, including MSPs, and it was really fantastic. And there's loads of information on that on the Stop Cambo site. So if you just go to Stop Cambo on any social media channel, you'll find it, and I'll put more information about that later. But there's some information on the screen that you can see here. It's really important that if anyone here is a member of Parliament or member of the public who cares about climate, being part of the Stop Cambo campaign is absolutely essential if we are going to meet any sort of climate targets. And I just wanted to make sure I highlighted that. So, pay to pollute. So the case, the court case that I'm a claimant on is called, the campaign around it is called Paid to Pollute, because the UK government's policy of maximising economic recovery of oil and gas means that polluters are paid to pollute. And it also means that we're set to burn almost 3 times more than we're meant to of fossil fuels. So as we know, burning oil and gas is the main cause of the climate crisis, the main cause of increasing emissions. And burning oil and gas in already operating offshore fields would exceed the UK's fair share of the Paris goals. So that's already operating offshore fields. And this policy of maximising economic recovery is promoting more and more extraction. And it's in direct contradiction to any sort of climate goals or climate aims at all. So since signing the Paris Agreement in 2016, the UK government has paid £3.2 billion of public money to North Sea oil and gas companies. So the no magic money tree government seemed to have found a lot of money to pay to companies that already pay their CEOs £7 million in bonuses and already lay off many hundreds of workers all over, and especially in the North Sea. Shell, for example, one of the companies that hasn't paid tax because of these loopholes and these subsidies, they have announced plans to cut over 300 jobs in the North Sea, so they don't really care about jobs. So yeah, in recent years, companies like Shell and BP were actually paid to pollute. They paid us next to nothing in tax, and we paid them millions to keep polluting, or while they laid off thousands of workers. And it's important that we highlight this and this issue. So our case is asking for a judicial review of this policy, what we want is for the government to kind of include and instill proper policies which actually will transition us into a green economy rather than propping up a declining oil and gas industry. Investment in a green industry can create 3 times as many jobs as oil and gas. There's actually such a huge opportunity here if the government actually decides to have their actions be the same as what they're saying and actually invest in a green economy in our future rather than sacrificing us for profit. So I don't think we should waste this chance. And this kind of court case is hoping to change this policy, influence this policy, and mean that instead of propping up this declining industry, we're actually funding and producing a just transition that is led by workers, their unions, and affected communities, and actually will move us towards I would prefer a carbon negative economy rather than net zero, which isn't zero. That's a whole different talk. So if you're sitting there and thinking, why litigation? This seems a bit drastic. Aren't there other things you could do? There are many reasons why I've decided to take a legal route. Also, I'm one of 3 claimants. There are 2 other claimants. One is an ex-oil and gas worker, and another one is a campaigner with the SNP, actually, in Scotland, in Aberdeen. But for me, as a young person, especially as a young Black woman, especially as a young Black woman I was born in Jamaica, and half my family are in Jamaica. Jamaica is somewhere that was previously colonized by the British and by colonial violence this country still hasn't paid reparations to. But also it's a country that is much more vulnerable, or has been made more vulnerable to the climate crisis. And it's somewhere where I fear for my family who still live there when I see intensity of floodings, intensity of weather events, where they don't have as much agency as I have here in the UK in creating change around that. The climate crisis is a justice issue in who is being impacted the most and hardest, but also in what nations have contributed the least and are feeling those increased impacts the most. So living in the UK, I have closer proximity to creating change around emissions because of the fact the UK is historically and currently one of the biggest polluters in the world. And we need to change our policy here, and that impacts the rest of the world. So I previously, and how I got into kind of activism around the subsidies that the fossil fuel industry are given by the government was through non-violent direct action. So the picture that you see of me on this screen is me locking on, so with my arm in a metal tube, as part of the Extinction Rebellion Scotland protest that happened in Westminster in October of 2019. I locked on, so put my arm in a tube so that I couldn't be removed by the police outside of the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy to raise awareness of the fact that these huge amounts of subsidies are given, and also the fact that the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy houses both the Committee on Climate Change and the Oil and Gas Association, who both seem to be in maybe contradiction to each other. And so that was how I first got into campaigning around these subsidies, was through that action in 2019. And then I think I found that I've taken absolutely every action that we can take, or that we're told that we can take as young people, or just as citizens of this country, to try and create change. I've gone vegan, I've boycotted fast fashion, I've done all the lifestyle things. I've also given speeches, I've used social media to my best ability, I've been a part of nonviolent direct action, and yet still the government are not taking adequate action on climate. Still all we get is lip service and we don't get real action, and still all we get is all of these lies that are told to us about how much they care about climate whilst not actually acting. So I think what I felt like putting my arm in an arm tube and putting myself in proximity to arrest was a last resort, but then I found out about this court case and got myself involved and signed on as a claimant. And this really is a last resort. So the first point there is that litigation and all these kind of court cases that you're seeing come around the world around climate, they are last resort tactics, because the government has broken promises. They have signed international binding agreements and then broken those agreements, and when courts can offer some meaningful accountability there. Also, litigation is important for clarifying who is really responsible for the climate crisis. So often, fossil fuel companies, especially BP, who popularized the idea of a climate footprint to kind of individualize responsibility for climate action and move the spotlight away from them. We're told that we are responsible for the climate crisis as individuals, and that we must just change our individual actions in order to create change. But the reality is that it's systems that are responsible, and governments and the fossil fuel industry. The people who are responsible have names and addresses. They are people and companies who have created this crisis. There are 20 companies that are responsible for a third of all greenhouse gas emissions since the pre-industrial era. And those companies have only been allowed to pollute as much as they have because of being propped up and supported by governments like the UK government. So taking the government to court is a really clear way that we can nail down the responsibility that the government has and make it clear and on record that they have known about it and willfully been harmful, and they've chosen not to act. Also, another thing is that people, I'm sure many of you watching this, maybe you didn't know that there are huge amounts of subsidies that the UK government give to the oil and gas industry. And that's also because the government uses a lot of semantic tricks. They'll say that these aren't actually subsidies because they use their own definition of subsidies, even though the IMF and many other organisations see what they're giving as subsidies. So in the courts, facts can be brought to light and facts can be put on the record, which is why litigation is an important tactic, but it is only one of many tactics. And I still am involved with nonviolent direct action, as you saw at the Cambo protest, and with using social media and speeches and everything, because I think that we have to use as many tactics as we can to create change, because change isn't passive, it comes from all of us choosing to act. So I realise I might have spoken really quickly there, but if you're wondering how you can help, supporting the case would be a fantastic way that you can help. If you go to paytopollute.org.uk, you can find lots of ways that you can support. There's an open letter as well there. And also supporting the Stop Cambo campaign is a fantastic way that people can support and show that there is public support for a real transition and just transition. So if you go to Stop Cambo on all social media and check out linktree/stopcambo for more actions, there's loads of different things that you can do there. Thank you so much for listening. I'm happy to answer any questions later on.
Thank you very much, Mikaela. That was absolutely excellent and a lot of great information there. Just a quick apology that we're running a wee bit late because we had a technical hitch at the very beginning. So thank you, Mikaela. I'd like to hand over to Poppy from the Wales Youth Climate Ambassadors to tell us what she and her fellow ambassadors in Wales are doing to raise awareness and activities in their area. Over to you, Poppy.
Thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Poppy Stahl-Evans. I'm 16 and joining you today from Newport, South Wales. Now I'm here today on behalf of an incredible group of ardent campaigners from Wales, known as the Youth Climate Ambassadors. Today, my message is both for the young people watching and for our MPs. But first, a little bit about YCA. So YCA is a group of 15, 13 to 25-year-old activists who are facilitated by Size of Wales and the Welsh Centre of International Affairs. We have the aim of amplifying the youth voice and promoting accessible climate action at all levels, whether this may be individuals, schools, businesses, governments, and on the international stage. As a group, we have only been established for around 18 months, but despite this, we have been incredibly proactive. At first, our work focused on advising businesses and schools on how they can become more eco-friendly. This included incorporating student voice, utilising green spaces, and working towards a plastic-free environment. We then began to hold events and began meeting with Welsh Government ministers. And eventually YCA began to recognise deeper rooted issues. So we became partners of the group Climate Cymru, which is aiming to take 10,000 Welsh voices to COP26. We have continued our commitment to a global approach through meeting with the US Embassy, and I've even had the fantastic opportunity to speak at the United Nations. As a group, we try to remember that every aspect of the climate crisis is interlinked with the lives we currently live. Because of this, our manifesto has a broad range of demands, from setting clear carbon caps for businesses, banning fast fashion, and calling for all governments to produce a reforestation plan and meet a zero deforestation by 2025. Now, it is important to emphasise this because it allows us to truly understand the cause and effect nature of climate action. Ultimately, every decision we make, everything we buy, every time we use a car, everything we eat creates a carbon footprint. Our increased carbon footprint then contributes to global warming. Now, I know that the notion that every action we do has an impact on the planet is quite scary and overwhelming, but it's true. And this is why I believe that so-called climate anxiety is on the rise amongst young people. Climate anxiety is on the rise because young people are beginning to understand the impact that we have on the planet. We are beginning to understand that if we don't act soon, we will run out of time to mitigate the effects of climate change. We have already seen the effects from the soaring temperatures in Canada to the floods in Germany, and climate anxiety is on the rise because young people are no longer blinkered. Young people are seeing the climate crisis for what it truly is, a crisis. Now, this isn't a bad thing. I believe that climate anxiety can be incredibly positive. If you are anxious for your planet, it means you care. It means you want to make a difference. And to be frank, everyone should feel this way because everyone can make a difference. To the young people listening today, please hear this. Your voice does matter, your action matters, and you can help to quite literally save the world from the climate crisis. To make climate conscious decisions like minimising your use of single-use plastic, eating less red meat, using public transport where appropriate and where it's safe to, and using your voice to lobby MPs and make yourself heard can really aid and is essential to the fight for climate justice. You have the power to contribute to real change, even simply by setting up an eco committee in your school. You can help protect our world and future generations to come. However, I must turn to our government and add at this stage, individual action is not enough. As a government, we all need to stop relying on individual action. It's not enough because for centuries, we've passed greedy, reckless, and narrow-minded policy that has landed us in a climate crisis. Now is the time to hold ourselves accountable, to be global citizens and to recognise our responsibility. Now is the time for governments all across the world, including ours, to produce radical climate action policy. At climate strikes, young people often chant system change, not climate change. This is because our system isn't broken. It's doing what it's meant to, because our system isn't designed to protect the minorities or to protect the planet. Therefore, as politicians, you have a duty not only to the planet, not only to your constituents, but to future generations to explore a new infrastructure that puts the planet first. An infrastructure that makes climate action accessible to everyone. You have a duty to pass policy where the well-being of the earth is at the forefront of your mind. Whether this may be through carbon caps, a carbon tax, banning single-use plastic, committing to an even more ambitious reforestation plan, or helping the thousands of climate refugees, or genuinely committing to impactful action at COP26 and following up on those commitments. Unfortunately, the time for discussion is over. The time for action is quite literally now or never. Every bill passed to protect the planet also protects people across the world. It protects future generations, and it will protect our economic stability and prosperity. All you need to do as politicians is listen and commit to action. All we need to do is work together. And I hope that as a nation we can do this, but it's time to leave this vicious cycle and begin looking to actual alternatives to protect the future of not only our planet, but the future generations to come, and to pay back the debt of climate destruction that our country has caused. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Poppy, for an extremely well-rounded presentation, a very interesting presentation. If I can now hand over to Nyeleti of the Choked Up campaign, and on why they decided to take action, formed their own group to highlight the problem of toxic air in their own communities and other communities around them. So without any further ado, can I hand you over now to Nyeleti? Thank you.
Hi everyone, and thank you so much for inviting Choked Up to speak at this. We really appreciate it. I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully you can all see that and it's loaded. So my name is Nyeleti. I'm 17 and I co-founded the Choked Up campaign in August 2020, so just under a year ago, with 3 others. The ultimate aim of our campaign is to get safe levels of air quality, not just in London, but around the country. And we think the most efficient way to do this would be through new clean air legislation, be that a Clean Air Act or the Environment Bill, which would enforce this more efficiently and hopefully get some real change and action. The particular focus of our campaign is the disproportionate effects of air pollution on deprived communities, Black and brown communities, and ones that have been historically marginalised through housing and colonisation. Despite these communities not necessarily contributing to the criminal levels of air pollution that we see in our cities, they happen to be at the forefront, and this needs to be addressed. We do our work alongside full-time education and have so far partnered with multiple climate organisations, including EDF, Climate Earth, and Global Action Plan. Earlier this year, we launched an action to highlight the disproportionate effects of air pollution. And as you can see on the screen, we did a road sign action that was addressed at both car drivers and passers-by to raise the profile of the link between environmental issues such as air pollution and race and class, and to get people talking and to raise our profile. But we would like to make explicit that we are not only addressing individuals, but specifically the government, as this needs to be huge radical change and cannot fall onto the burden of individuals. So for us, the intersectionality of the climate justice movement is extremely important. And it is one of the reasons why we actually started the campaign in the first place. As many of you may know, the climate justice movement has a reputation for being extremely middle class and white. And indeed, the environment sector, it was revealed earlier this year, is the second least ethnically diverse work sector after farming. And this simply isn't good enough. In the Fridays for Future marches that started from 2018 and we all actively took part in, we didn't perceive it as a space that was addressing the climate issues that we see as most important and most pressing. Of course, the polar bears and the ice caps are important, but at the moment and for the past few years, there have been real people at the forefront of the climate crisis, specifically in the global south and in former colonized countries. For example, there have been an increase in freak weather events such as the cyclone Idai in southern Africa that displaced hundreds of thousands of people. And yet it is only now when there are, of course, terrible floods in Germany, for example, that the link between that air pollution, that the environment issues are really coming to the forefront of people's minds, and this is not good enough. We also need to be aware of the amazing activists that have already been doing a lot of work in this area, and that have highlighted that climate justice is also a social justice issue, such as Wretched of the Earth and loads of people that we worked with. So as parliamentarians, it is one way that you can support the issue of air pollution and wider and the climate crisis, is to engage with your youth constituents and really be aware of the inherent link between environmental justice and racial and social justice. Yeah, this would be really important when to keep in mind when voting, yeah. So thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, that's excellent, Nyeleti. Thank you very much. I'm not on mute, am I, Christian?
Yeah, you're back, John.
Oh, thank you.
So I think we should open to questions from MPs and their offices. And I know that some of the schools have had to pull out last minute or are having technical problems. So we will use the time to get MP questions in and also distribute the content to the rest of the audience after the fact.
Sure. I can't see any questions in the chat, so I don't know if anybody's raised their hand so far. But I would like to put a question, if I may, to our three presenters, and it basically goes back to what we're trying to do here today. But if I could take them in just in the order that you presented to us, basically what I'm asking is, what could MPs, local authorities, the devolved administrations, and basically institutions do to encourage participation in groups like yourselves in climate action activities, within our own constituencies? I think the great points you've made about society's poor paying for the mistakes of society's rich are very well made locally and globally, and that's something that needs to be aired all the time, I think. So I wonder if you could just start off with yourself, Mikaela, and maybe tell us what engagement you've had with MPs or whichever area you're in yourself, and if you're being listened to.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm definitely someone who maybe harasses my MPs quite a lot by sending a lot of emails about different think campaigns I'm involved with. And I think one thing that is really frustrating is I feel like a lot of the time the response that we get is just lip service and no action. So it's almost like, oh yeah, I care about this, but I'm not going to do anything about it. Or, oh, they'll suddenly call on me when they want to use that as like a PR perspective, so that it looks like they're acting more than they actually are. And so I think what would be great to see is if members of Parliament would actually go into the groups that are organising around climate, sit there and listen, not for a PR stunt or anything like that. Don't take any photos or don't publicise it. You can just listen and listen to what people actually want to happen. And then you can amplify the groups themselves without having to make it as some sort of affiliation with yourself. I think that that's how you can have some sort of meaningful participation with groups, is if you're doing it in a meaningful way to amplify the groups themselves rather than to use it as a way to greenwash yourself. And I think also if we see actual meaningful action coming from MPs, especially I think from a Scottish perspective, there's other MPs in Scotland, it'd be great to have MPs openly talking about the importance for us to phase out oil and gas as soon as possible. And I think that that would be a really big step for people to make, because even around the Stop Cambo campaign, we've had almost silence from the Scottish Government on this. And what we actually need is to have action, and for people to take the risk of saying these things, because it is really important. The reality is if we do not phase out oil and gas as soon as possible, we will have complete climate collapse. And that is not me being an alarmist, that is me being completely serious and honest. And I think that we need to be honest and serious when we're talking about these things. And so often I hear a lot of people acting as if this isn't serious and isn't an emergency. And it really, really, really is. And it really is important. And also, we need to make sure that we're also protecting workers' rights when we're doing all of these things. But the best way that we can do that is to invest in a transition now. And so I think I would say is, if you want to actually support groups, do that in a like organic and meaningful way, and not in a way that is just to promote yourself, but also do that in your job as well as an MP, actually represent what people want and what all of us should want, and also the loved humans that are dying and being harmed today by the climate crisis as well. I think be active and aware and keep engaged with all these issues as well, but actually listen to what we have to say would be great. Yeah, that's what I say. I'll pass on to someone else. I'm speaking too much.
You probably raised more thoughts there than anything else, but I don't want to hog it. Poppy, would you like to give us your thoughts on what MPs could do, local authorities, or the youth parliaments, whatever set up, how we could be better engaged? I just wanted to add one rider to what I picked up on earlier on, and probably one of the reasons why we set this particular appg up was to try to get children from less privileged backgrounds involved in the decision-making process, to get them involved, being able to speak and be heard. And I think they hear, all too often, I think they hear the children are the best speakers in the school are brought forward to present, and I think that's something we'd like to change. So I'll just shut up now as well. Poppy, would you like to tell us what you think?
Definitely, thank you. So I'm very lucky. I have a really good relationship with my member of the Senedd and member of Parliament for my constituency. They've shown me a lot of support, and they've attended meetings, they've had discussions, and they've attended events. So I've been really lucky in that sense. And my local authority has taken me seriously, which has been incredible. So I've worked with my local authority to provide all high schools in my city with reusable and sustainable sanitary products to help tackle period poverty in a sustainable way. However, I think sometimes it needs to go deeper than this. As MPs and as representatives of the people, you can't just be acting on climate action after you've met with a youth ambassador or after someone has brought it to your attention. This needs to be something that's happening all of the time, and in every decision that you make. It should be in the back of your mind every time you're looking at a new bill, or every time you're looking at a new policy or an issue that a constituent has. You need to be thinking, right, well, if I make this decision, how is it going to impact the planet, and how is it going to impact generations to come? I think that's really important, because climate change isn't just a one-note thing. It's not just about the weather. It's literally about everything, because it is going to impact every single aspect of our lives all across the world. And I also think as well, something that I sometimes find quite frustrating with politicians is that you need to know your science as well. I'm not saying go do a climate science degree at Oxford, but what I'm saying is you need to understand that climate action isn't just recycling. Climate action isn't just going to plant a tree in your local park. It's so much deeper than that. It's things like fossil fuels. It's things like single-use plastic. It's like the displacement of people. It's so interlinked, and I think politicians need to have a bigger respect for that and recognize that in order to move forward. In regards to kind of engaging with young people and with social groups, I think that's really important, because as you've just said, it comes to a point where you can't just engage with the same people. We're very lucky that our group has been quite recognised in Wales, and that we've had a really lovely response from politicians. However, it's about the people in communities who don't have necessarily the privilege to act in the way I'm acting, or don't live in an environment where they feel empowered enough to use their voice. It's about acting in a way that supports them as well, and going out of your way to meet with them. Sometimes you can't just expect young people who care about things to come to you. You need to empower your community to act as well, because, you know, I'm sure we can all agree we're really lucky to be here today, and we've all had our own individual struggles, but with that comes, I'm very privileged to come from a family that has always empowered my voice, and not a lot of young working class Welsh girls come from that family. So it's really important to remember that, and just, as you said, not to keep going to the people who are coming to you, to branch out and make sure everyone feels empowered to be part of the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nyeleti, would you like to tell us what you think we could be doing more?
Yeah, absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree with both of those points. I think that one thing is that too often the environmental conversation and reference to the climate catastrophe is not part of like public discourse enough, and it feels like something that you still have to tune into, and I don't get the impression that it's at the forefront of MPs' minds, or that it really is even in any of their considerations. And, you know, especially not the government, given that they've delayed the environment bill. I think it's 2 times already. So I think it's without being performative, to like make it clear that if the environment is something, and it should be something that is part of your decision making, that make it clear that it is, and that it's not just something that you have to talk about to like appease young people, or you know, to seem like you care about the environment. If that makes sense. Thank you.
Oh, no, thank you very much. I think
Can I
Mikaela,
say
to
one
you.
quick thing? Is that all right? Yeah.
Am I all right, Christian? Because I'm not sure.
Of course, you're in
Yeah.
charge, John.
Am I?
I think also one thing that I'd love to stop hearing from members of parliament is that young people inspire them. I don't want to inspire you. I want you to act. I think it's really actually insulting when I hear people say, oh, your work inspires me so much, and then I don't see that be implemented into any changes in that person's actions. And I think I don't want you to say that any of us inspire you unless you're going to actually implement that into your policies and into your actions, because it's just it's insulting really to all of us, because we all shouldn't be having to spend our like youth acting and spending all of our time acting when that's not our jobs, but that is your job. Your job is literally to represent the people and to act, and you are not doing that in many ways. A lot of you just, I feel like I need to say that. Another thing is kind of linked to what people have said. There's a great quote by Audre Lorde, who's a revolutionary Black queer feminist writer who is incredible, where she talks about the fact that we do not have single issue struggles because we don't live single issue lives. And I just want all of you to take that through you as your mantra when you look at any kind of thing that you're doing in your life. It is not a single issue struggle. We do not live single issue lives. Climate is connected to everything, but also so every different social justice issue is connected, and you cannot look at things in isolation. Things aren't just COVID issues or something else issue. They're all climate issues, and they're all racial justice issues, and they're all feminist issues. So I just say that. Move on.
Can I just follow up, Christian, before we move over to yourself? But, you know, the point you've all made, in particular the last point there, is so true. So for your information, I sit in the Environmental Audit Committee. And when we talk about supply chain of goods and how the whole supply chain is messed up from in one reason or another, and, you know, even in the fashion industry in particular, how they source their goods, what has come across so many times is that supply chain needs to include children from the earliest stages in the education system, so that they understand everything about how they're educated in a universal sense, that they have an awareness of everything that they're going to do in their life affects the climate and the planet. We've heard that from students of architecture, people that have worked in the aeronautics industry. They got there more by accident than anybody putting them into a green and rounded awareness of what was going on in their communities. And I think that is, I know that is something that has to change within the education system. So we've been pushing for that here in Westminster, and also the Scottish Government, to try to make this thing recognised. As you probably know, you get green flags in schools, and a lot of the things, great, you get out there and you understand things, doesn't really actually get you anywhere academically, and that's something that absolutely needs to change crucially. So Christian, sorry, over to you now if we've got some students waiting to ask some questions.
Unfortunately, we have most of our students with issues coming in. So I think the question I'll ask all of the panelists is, we've created this APPG really with it. It's not meant to be a one-off meeting or a one-off opportunity to state your case. And all of you over the next 12 months will have certain things you want to achieve. Can you be very clear with everyone around what do you think those milestones will be over the next 12 months? And do you see any way where this platform can help you along the way? And I'm saying 12 months as an example, it could be beyond that. So this is a platform created to give you a voice, and it's not a one-off voice. So do you have any thoughts on that? We can start in the same order of the speaker. So Mikaela.
Sorry, I realise I've just spoken quite a lot, so apologies, but I'll try and keep it short. I think I'm obviously hoping the next 12 months that we win our court case. There's no longer a policy of maximising economic recovery. The UK government announces they're no longer going to subsidise the oil and gas industry. They're not going to approve any more projects, and that we will have a green and just economy being actually prioritised. That is the dream. It shouldn't be a dream, it should be a practicality. It's really important that we actually do that, especially because the IEA recently warned that we cannot have new investments in oil and gas if we're going to stay below 1.5 degrees. So I think that's what I'm hoping will happen. And I also hope that everyone who's here today will be supportive of that and will speak out against the subsidies that are given to the oil and gas industry. They'll also speak out about any new licenses being given. We shouldn't be giving any new oil and gas licenses, let alone approvals. And I really hope that everyone here will openly speak out against these licenses, against these approvals, and against the policy of maximising economic recovery, and will support the court case publicly as well. Thank you all very much.
And thank you. I think that for us, as I mentioned earlier, our aim is to amplify the youth voice and to empower accessible climate action at all levels. And I think for me, this encompasses a lot of things. So something that I'm really looking for is an issue we have struggled with is that businesses seem to need an incentive to act, which I get. We live in a world that prioritises economy and making money above all else. So what I want to see is the government recognising that and, I don't know, creating incentives, creating in a way in which businesses can act to put our future first, and creating a way in which the government can support that to happen. I also really feel as though our government needs to prioritise the youth voice more, and that needs to happen not just in a tokenism way, not just a selfie when you're doing a litter pick with a young person. I want to see young people at the forefront of decision making, actually being a part of conversations, and not just young people who would typically be there with privilege. I want to see young people there who have a voice and who haven't been tapped into for the wrong reasons. I think it's time we need to start doing that. And another key thing that YCA is working towards this year is COP26. We know this is a big deal. We know this is possibly one of the most important climate conferences of our lifetime. So I want to see the Welsh government commit, and not just the Welsh government, sorry, the UK government commit to real action and to be taking a world-leading approach that puts our climate and future generations first. And I also want to see these decisions being informed by everyone, not just the people with the seat at the table. I want to see it being informed by activists in our country, by struggles across the world caused by our action. And I want to see not only commitments, but action being made as a result of these commitments. So there's some things that we're working towards this year as a group, and that I would be very appreciative to see our government also following up on.
Yeah, so for our campaign, one of the big things we'd like to see is, of course, a new Clean Air Act that is strict and really takes into account the different ways in which air pollution needs to be limited, because it is taking so many lives. But of course, the upcoming environment bill, it'd be great for the upcoming environment bill, it would be greatly appreciated if MPs really use their voice and their power to strengthen the quite frankly weak strategies that regard air quality in the environment bill, and push for that to actually result in actual change. And with COP26, we really hope that in a year's time, we will have not just left COP26 having signed up to radical action, but that action will already be firmly in motion, and that we will already be on the path to a world that isn't so threatened by the climate catastrophe.
Thank you. Christy, do you get any other?
Sure, I don't want to put Carrie on the spot since she came in late, but I know she has a strong interest in environmental issues. So do you have any questions for the panelists, even at risk of maybe covering that they may have presented already?
Hi, Carrie.
Yeah, it's a little bit difficult when you don't know what has already been discussed, but I suppose just to sort of say very briefly, I'm a Labour MP and Shadow Minister for Green Transport. So a lot of my focus is trying to press the government to reduce the transport emissions. And I wondered one of the things I get a little bit frustrated about is there's quite often a big focus on the longer term goals. So people will talk about how, we've got to, limit global warming to 1.5 degrees, we've got to reach net zero. And I sometimes find when I point out to people, there are things like the Transport Decarbonisation Plan that has just been published, that is what we need to affect in the here and now. there's less engagement. And I just wondered what people think. You know, it's not very exciting, you know, to go into all the details about how many electric charging points we need, or, you know, whether e-bikes are the answer or whatever. But I just wondered your thoughts on whether the group had a role to play in that kind of more sort of techie angle of things, as opposed to, you know, inspiring people.
Is that for Mikaela?
Sorry, I feel like I'm just coming in. I can just come in, and anyone else obviously feel free to. I really think that this focus on longer term goals is a way of evading responsibility or evading any action. Also, net zero is not zero. It isn't zero emissions. And currently the net zero plans are reliant on technologies that don't exist and won't be ready by that time. Like even Shell are very open about the fact that carbon capture storage will not be ready in the scale that they want it to by that time. And it's not a solution. And it also still requires a lot of kind of harm that would be caused. And we should not be prioritising or promoting carbon capture storage. And I think that this current government's focus on that is a way of them evading having to take any action now or any real action now. So I wholeheartedly agree with you that we need to be starting these things now and looking at it as more than just these abstract ideas of inspiring each other and thinking about things and expanding our minds, but also thinking, what does that look like practically? And I think from my perspective as someone who campaigns around fossil fuels and just transition and that kind of stuff, it means like implementing policy that we do not approve or give any more licenses now. And that's something that we can realistically do, because already the government has last year they removed support for overseas oil and gas projects, and that hasn't been done for the North Sea yet. And what we need to do, I think that's something really practical that we could have in a timeline that could be done, and if anyone wants to reach out to help me with this campaigning, is to stop them from giving support to North Sea oil and gas companies as well, and actually start a transition now and actually invest in the infrastructure that's needed to have that transition happen from now, and stop delaying it as much as possible. Stop talking about carbon capture storage, which is just annoying, and actually start doing these things now. And these are really tangible things that we can do that go beyond the idea of like thinking more about climate. It's actually doing those things now. That's really
Poppy, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, thank you. I completely agree. I think to a lot of people, climate change seems like this really distant dystopian future that's going to happen to like our great grandkids. And so, yeah, we need to care about it, but it's quite chill. But it's not. Like, it's really cute for us to sit here and be like, yeah, we're going to do all these things by 2050. But realistically, we know we've only got like maximum a 10-year window to act genuinely before our opportunity to mitigate the effects of climate change goes. Because we know that climate change is going to affect us. We're literally already seeing that. You know, we've been seeing that for years. But the responsibility we have now is to prevent how much that affects us, and is to act to how it's already affecting us. So to be frank, I would say that at this stage, immediate action is more important than these long-term goals. Yes, it's awesome to have them there, but if we're not acting every day, and if we're not implementing policies that are going to have a positive effect every day, then there's really no point in committing to these big goals, because you're not going to get to them. Like, it's not just one, oh yes, we're net zero and now everything's sorted. That's not how it works, which is frustrating, because believe me, I wish it was how it works. It would save a lot of campaigning time, but it's not. And I think that's something also that needs to be addressed in that kind of realm, is addressing the impact that climate change is already having. So we know that it's already affecting and displacing thousands of people in other countries because of our action. And so it's about also taking responsibility for that. And I believe working in a global approach to help everyone on this journey, and to ensure that everyone can make those steps to help us mitigate the impact of climate change. And as I said in my speech, almost pay back our debt. It's time to like take that everyday action and create a new infrastructure and a new system that allows that action to continue and to be sustainable, because our current system isn't designed to do that, and so it can't do that. So we need to change it. Thank you.
Thank you. Nyeleti, have you got anything to add before we finish?
Yeah, I think particularly in the air pollution and air quality conversation, transport is a really big sticking point, and the expectations on people is a really big sticking point, because there's kind of like a playing politics element of wanting to reduce air pollution because it's, you know, taking lives, but not wanting to make such big changes that for example, people can't drive their cars every day, or that people are expected to change their habits drastically, which ultimately we will have to do if the climate deteriorates as much as it's planning to. But I think there needs to be proper leadership and proper messaging, I guess, from the government and from people in power, to make that sacrifice clear, that if there isn't like ways that we change our habits, and of course that has to be subsidized, because it's not practical for everyone. If there isn't that kind of change, then we will have to suffer the consequences, and people are already suffering the consequences for that in a really bad way. So thank you.
Sorry, can I quickly add one more comment?
I don't know if we've got time left, Christian, have we?
I think we're good for one more comment from Poppy, and then we move to a close.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, guys. I just want to illustrate, and this has been mentioned already, but it links to this question, is that at the minute, climate action for individuals is a very middle class topic. To go completely vegan or to get an electric car is something that very few people can do. If you live on a council estate, where are you going to charge your electric car? Do you know what I'm saying? If you're in a situation where you're struggling to make ends meet and you're struggling to feed your family, you're not going to think about going for the most expensive vegan option at a restaurant. That's not your focus. So something that our government needs to do now is look at how we can make climate action accessible and how we can stop it from being an elitist topic. We need to make sure that everyone is brought along on this journey with us, and the only way to do that is by really reevaluating our structures of society and really reevaluating what's important. For example, I genuinely believe that all new council house buildings should be eco-friendly. They should all have the opportunity to have an electric car, because at the minute we're really creating a very hierarchy in climate action, and that's not fair, because climate action is going to impact everyone, so everyone should be able to have the opportunity to also impact it and to protect their livelihoods.
Anything else, Kerry? Did you have? You're on mute, Kerry.
Well, yeah, I would just say very quickly, I agree with that, and that's very much the sort of things that I've been saying. I get really cross when it's all down to consumer choice and the market, and there isn't government intervention, but also very much agree in terms of the affordability and accessibility of some of the things, like electric vehicles, like e-bikes and that. The bell's just gone, and I've got a Foreign Office question, so I've got to whiz off now, but I'm glad I could at least say hello quickly, and I will listen back to the recording. So
glad you could make it, Kerry. Thanks very much.
Okay, again. See you all. Bye.
Thank you. Okay, everybody. So I don't know if I can add anything to everything that's been said, but I definitely want to add my sincere thanks to everyone. And I see we've got a question being asked by Mikaela Critchley to everyone. I'm sure we'll be able to reply to that question in the chat later on. But I just want to say really thanks again, and I'm not going to get all soppy and patronise anybody about what they do, because I believe that if you can't inspire kids without doing things that get them inspired, then there isn't any point in doing anything. That's a fundamental belief. It goes back to if you want to change the world, you get busy in your own little corner. And if we're not, as politicians at any level, I've heard, just to summarise again, so many times you hear that local authorities produce emergency climate actions, but they don't have any policy in place. It's just a phrase that they stick up there. That's not acceptable either. Every person that we're in every school should have access to ways in which they can change their life. And I like everything everybody's said this morning. So you have to get through to the parts that cannot reach, and that's one of the problems that we have to overcome. So basically, I just want to say thank you for all the work that you're doing in your own communities. I hope this goes out to a wide range of people, and I've got no doubt at all that the passion, the care and the professionalism has to be said, the way in which you've delivered your message this morning will help us, and I hope we go into a wider audience in the future. So thanks again, everyone, for a wonderful ICN, our Anti-Climate Network Secretariat, put so much into this, and I hope you have a wonderful summer and a safe summer. And it's up to you whether you wear your mask or not, I guess, but I'm definitely wearing mine. So thank you all very much indeed.